So good morning, everybody. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Operations Planning Committee for February 12th, 2021 to order. I appreciate the schedule change this week. There were some very important meetings. Obviously, the governor's budget address was on Wednesday, and then a CCM meeting about the governor's budget address on Thursday. So I really appreciate the change of schedule. Nice to see all of you this morning. We will get right to our business, and that would be the first order of business is to approve our meeting minutes of January 14th. If you've had a chance to review those, when you're ready, I'll accept a motion to approve or any edits you may have.
So moved.
Thank you, Seth.
I'll second it. Duke.
Thank you, Duke. Any changes or edits?
Not for me.
Okay, if not, then John, would you do the courtesy? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great, that's it. Okay, let's dive right in, and we will start with Duke, Board of Ed.
Thank you, Jamie. Good morning, everyone. In the interest of everyone's time, I'll be quick, but of course open to any questions. We approved our budget this week from the superintendent's budget, went through our ad cut night and through our whole budget process. A lot of dialogue around that, good dialogue, and a lot of feedback and input from all the boards and committees, and of course, all the parents. So good dialogue around that. The final budget that was approved by the Board of Ed was for $106,624,199, which is a 4.03% increase over last year. The capital budget that was approved was $2,312,921. So the budget now continues to go through the budget process to the Board of Finance and then on to the RTM through that process. This week also, thanks to Board of Finance, thanks to RTM Education and RTM F&B, we got the appropriation process started for the COVID. The board had approved a reopening and COVID expenditure appropriation of $2,384,934. We had approved to send through the appropriation process. Literally several days after that, we were informed of an ESSER grant that Board of Ed was awarded. That grant was for $596,805. So going through the Board of Finance process and having conversations to make sure everyone was on the same page and understanding the grant and how we go about assessing that grant, our application request was decreased to $1,788,130, which makes sense with now our ability to access that ESSER grant. So thank you to the Board of Finance. They called a special meeting. This week, we met with Clara and RTM Education. Last night, Jack Davis, RTM Finance. So now it goes on to RTM in February. So that process worked well, and thanks to everyone out there that was part of that process. COVID cases, we stand, I think, with a couple of cases this week. We reported Tuesday night 11 current cases. That's ticked up just a couple this week, but we actually had a few days with no cases. Quarantine currently around 50, cumulative cases 219, cumulative quarantines 1,533. Our goal continues to be on track after the break to have all students back in the classrooms on March 1st. We continue to work through the phased process, which seems to be working. There is a professional development day today and a makeup day for Tokenique that had an extra day because of power outage, and we go into our winter break next week. I do just want to do a shout out, Jamie, from Alan. He wanted to acknowledge and appreciate the help at Gentile, Department of Public Works, around some coordination and help with snow removal, all that good stuff that has to be done around town to keep roads and sidewalks, get the kids into school with some delayed openings. So Alan wanted to do a shout out there. Alan and Jocelyn and the health department, I'm sure you know, Jamie, are working on a potential staff clinic. We've gotten all our numbers submitted in terms of number of employees and staff. So when that opens up, we can look at a potential staff clinic on vaccination for our staff. We also kicked off this week. The administration and facilities committee have done some good work and kicked off a facilities meeting, previewed the work done on the library redesign and also looking at the educational spaces in the 3 elementary schools, Royal, Hindley, and Holmes. So we had a good meeting this week. Move that to the board for further discussion, but I think it positions those schools to get the portables removed, which has been a goal, get some of the music and other type of education facilities up to speed, and also do some classroom work. And really a good next step in our overall look at facilities. And it also includes looking at 5+ years, the capital.
Doing what?
Hang on one second. Steve,
like
you're not on mute. Could you
I
mute?
filled it this morning. Not working?
Steve, could you mute your phone until it's time for you to report? Thank you. Perfect. Great.
So the work that was done around the facilities also takes into account the capital work, the work that can be done on.
I'm sorry, Duke. I apologize.
Yep.
There's a lot of background noise so whoever is unmuted at this time, if you wouldn't mind, please muting your audio until it's your time to report. Thank you so much. Okay.
Sure. So just a quick recap on the facilities work for the 3 elementary schools. It does take into account the longer range capital and infrastructure work that needs to be done on those schools. So a really good holistic approach on what needs to be done for those 3 elementary schools. And the administration has kind of prioritized the work. We'll go through the process at the board. So prioritization and timelines may change, but a lot of good work has been done there. Just on kind of a sad note, one of our teachers at Tokenique lost her son last week. Just thoughts and prayers for her. She was part of our family, being a Tokenique family. So Alan wanted me to just mention that. The district has worked hard with the local school and also with the family. So that teacher continues to be in our thoughts and prayers. So I'll pause there for any questions.
Thank you very much, Duke. That is very sad news. I'm very sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
Questions for Duke?
I'm just very pleased, Duke, that your numbers match ours on the agenda for the RTM.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Seth.
And I want to commend the work that you're doing around the 3 elementary schools to really make good headway on finally plan to get rid of the portables. I know how important that is to the town in general. I listened in on your meeting the other day. It sounds like a really thoughtful plan. Look forward to watching the progress of that collective project as it moves forward. And I know that you'll work with the Board of Finance on the funding for that, whether it will be staged out over a period of time or whatnot. So
thank you, Jamie.
Great work. And certainly we'll be very excited when we can get vaccine to your teachers and staff that want it. So
yes.
Hopefully that will happen sooner rather than later.
Good. Thank you.
With regards to, I missed at one point, Duke, I'm sorry, the 3 elementary schools, which ones are they?
Thanks, Steve. It would be Royal, Hindley, and Holmes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I knew Holmes had one of them. All righty, thanks.
Okay, why don't we go to Steve?
There we go. Can you guys see me okay? I'm
Yes.
talking from my iPhone. Sorry about that. We had a little bit of time off. Right now, the big things that are still on our desk are the 7-Eleven application, and I want to ask some questions and give you some information on that. And then the other one that we started the other day is BMW, which is one of the largest employers in Darien, has an application that we saw for the first time this past Tuesday to do a it's not really an expansion, it's a movement around of their facilities to knock down half of their facility and then rebuild another building in a different spot. BMW is doing a lot of landscaping in the back and designs and whatnot. They've been to the ARB a couple times, at least I think 3 times, and then they've been to us once. So we saw the application the other day. We saw it here from our traffic people, but I think it's moving forward at a good progression at this point. There is definitely some neighbor questions with Middlesex Commons behind them. If you guys remember, Middlesex Commons is on one side, and a small piece, Whole Foods, is on another side, and the town recycling and transfer station is on the third side, for lack of a side. So we're working through that one right now, and we'll see where it goes. Relative to 7-Eleven, we're trying to wrap up the public comment portion of that. The applicant has basically presented everything they have to present. We did get the traffic study. The traffic studies are finalized. We got a report from the legal traffic authority, which some people call the local traffic authority, which is effectively the police department. They're not too happy with the potential traffic that can be there. Is their closing statement in their letter relative to the property, relative to proposal. The thing that I don't know, and I have not seen it live, is, Jamie, did you hear what happened at the ZBA the other night on what they had to do? Because the ZBA has 2 requirements to look at this application. One is a request or variance for the sign out front, and there's another statutory state request that they have to approve on the application.
No, I've not been made aware of that.
Okay. The ZBI has 2 functions in this. One is a sign request, which is nothing major, and there's another function that they have to approve any. I think it's a state statutory item. Any gas station or filling station that's done in our town or a municipality has to get ZBA approval. We've been waiting on that. Supposedly had a meeting last week or on Wednesday, but I didn't get the results of it. So I got to follow up on that. The other thing that we're just watching is we're monitoring the proposals that are floating around, or the bills that are floating around relative to housing in the state of Connecticut. Basically, the bills up in Hartford. We did have a chairman's, so to speak, meeting with a woman from, I think it's RPA. She represents an advocacy group that's for housing. There was a bunch of the chairmen for our local towns on it. There's a bunch of items that came up that affect our town, affect other towns in our, local southwestern Connecticut area that this woman, I think her name is Wendy, is not really aware of. And it, I think it was well received. I think it was enlightening to the woman. She also had another person on the phone who was their director of communications. I forget that person's name. But that's something that is an ongoing process. Maybe Terry or Jamie know more about the timing relative to any bills that do come up. I did watch portions of the governor's address or budget address the other day, and it didn't seem like any of this stuff was on his radar screen. But maybe that was just a budgetary address, and it was not really policy addresses.
Right.
That's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, it was I'll go into that in my report.
Thanks, Terry. That's
Yeah,
pretty much it for me.
I'm curious though, Steve, why this woman with the RPA knew so little about this part of the state in housing.
It's a good question, Terry.
Yeah.
I think of the chairman that were on the Zoom meeting. Again, it's Darien, Greenwich, New Canaan, Westport, Wilton, Ridgefield. I don't think
Stamford, Norwalk, we're not on.
the cities are not on this. It's really just the smaller towns.
Okay.
But
Greenwich, Fairfield are larger towns. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Greenwich is on it. Fairfield is not. Fairfield's been invited. They came to one of these, ad hoc meetings and have not been back since. It's just surprising. I think the 7 or 6 towns that I mentioned, each one of us spoke individually and said what's going on inside our municipalities. And there was a lot of, wow, it seemed like she never heard of it. It's very odd.
Yeah.
It's very odd. And
Good,
then I
thank
think
you.
Francis Pickering was also on it. It's the first time I ever met him. He seems like a nice gentleman.
Well, he's very thorough. He's very knowledgeable, deeply knowledgeable about policy and so many other issues.
Right. I mean, I'm more of the local person. I mean, I care more about Darien. I don't go into the bigger policies, but as part of this new world, I guess I'm looking outside of our general, 4-wall box of Darien, including the other towns. But, I don't really know what happens up in Danbury or East Granby or Madison. I know Jeremy's on top of it with CCM. There's definitely some implications that could happen if some of these proposals go through to towns that surround UConn and maybe towns that surround Fairfield University or Sacred Heart for that matter. But we'll see. I don't know. Thank you.
Any other questions for Steve? Okay, then let's move on to Board of Finance, John Zabrowski.
Thank you, Jamie. Good morning, everybody. A few things on my list. One, just to reiterate and confirm Duke's comments about the Board of Education budget process, and particularly the COVID expenditure discussion that they had the other night. I think we did get to a good outcome, as has been reported publicly. And I think the assurance that I would give is that, one, the town has plenty of reserves to cover these kinds of expenses based on any reasonable estimate I've seen, both on the town and the Board of Education side. And those funds are readily available. So in the future, I think everyone watching should have confidence that we've got the resources to cover these expenditures, and that the board's decision not to budget for them and then create incremental tax burden on our taxpayers, I think makes good sense. Plus, the decision also leaves us open to be considered for grants to reimburse these expenses, which I think was also quite the responsible way to look at this and to come to a final decision. So again, I applaud both the process and the outcome. So thank you for that. Kathy Larkin sit around, which Jamie, you commented on as well, the update on the property tax deferment that we put in place in coordination with the Board of Selectmen. As a reminder, that's a way for taxpayers to defer payment of their property taxes for 90 days, which the state of Connecticut has empowered towns to adopt. And we did this once before and have done it again for the most current set of tax liabilities. And according to Kathy's report, we had 80 applications deferring about $920,000 in taxes. And that's versus, and actually of those 80, there were 42 of them that had applied for this when we did the tax deferral last time. So this was a combination of commercial and residential applicants. And I'm glad to see that several folks have been able to take advantage of this program. As a reminder, we had no trouble collecting the taxes due when they did become due the last time we had a deferral. So hopefully this is a good mechanism that gives some folks a little bit of flexibility in terms of meeting their tax obligations, while at the same time not putting the town's finances at risk. So I think just a win all around for everybody. We had a note giving us an update on the Oxbridge Building Committee process. That process continues to, I think, work extremely well. Lots of extraordinarily competent people on that committee, and thanks to Duke and Kip for your leadership of that group. It looks like, as a reminder, I guess, to point out, the RTM appropriated $63 million for that project. And based on the not to exceed contracts that the building committee has described recently, it looks like that total is $59 million, so nearly $4 million less than what's been appropriated. And that doesn't take into account state grants that they might be able to receive to cover some of these expenditures, 93% of which qualify for reimbursement. And if those grants come in, it's an incremental $6.3 million. So just overall, that's been a terrific process. I look forward to seeing a finished building that comes in on time and under budget, and it's clear they're well on their way to doing that, which is fantastic. I guess the last thing to mention is just the budget process update. So the way the calendar is right now, the next big meeting for the Board of Finance is going to be on February 2nd. So that's the public hearing that we'll have on the, well, there's a public hearing. I'm sorry, I'm reading from the wrong schedule. I have not had enough coffee this morning. Here it is. So our budget process sort of formally kicks off on March 2nd. That's when we have an official meeting to receive both the Board of Education and Board of Selectmen budgets. Following that, on March 9th, there's going to be a statutory meeting. So I would encourage anyone who's got public comment or points that they want to make either on the Board of Selectmen or Board of Education budget to attend that meeting. It's currently set for Tuesday, March 9th at 7:30. And I'm not quite sure what the mix of live in person versus by video will be. We'll probably work out something like we did for the State of the Town address, but in any case, that's coming. And that will kick off our formal review process, which starts in mid-March. And we have multiple meetings set to go through the various budgets by kind of line item for Board of Selectmen and then overall for the Board of Education. And then we'll wrap that up with a final vote on the budget and set the mill rate, which will be on April 6th. And at that point, the RTM will pick up the budget process and get to a final appropriation. So that's what's on the docket for us. And that's about all I have to report this morning. Any questions?
Thank you, John. Any questions for John? Board of Finance? Yes, Steve.
John, how did the grand list come out this year compared to last year? Have they settled that at this point?
I don't know that that's actually been settled. Jamie may have more insight on that. I've not seen a final.
It has been. It always gets settled at the end of January, and I think the grand list is up modestly. Let me see if I can find that report while we're talking. I want to say that it's up about 0.65 to 0.68%. So any forward motion in the grand list is very good news.
I'll check in with Tony at some point and see if any of the new projects are hitting at this point. I don't know what happened with the maybe somebody else knows about if all the building permits were pulled. Federal's obviously the one is leading the charge, but that's still at least a year away.
Yep, so the net grand list is up by $58.9 million, or a 0.68% increase in the grand list.
Well,
Great.
Always good news. Yep.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John.
I will interject. There is a bill up in Hartford. Hopefully, I don't think I'm in support of it. I have to study it a little bit more. That would disallow us from taxing at least the construction of homes while they're in the process. So that may change when we receive new tax revenues. Any other questions for John? Yes.
Just a comment. 4% from the Board of Education is not a small number. I know that a lot of work has been done on it, so I'll just leave it at that. It just, off the top of my head, seems to be a big number.
Yeah, the only thing I would say about that, again, we'll take a close look at that as part of our process.
I know you still have to work on it, John, so I don't mean to,
Yeah, no, it's a fair comment, and we'll have a pretty clear breakdown from our perspective for the public when the time comes. I think it's important to dissect that 4% and understand the various drivers. As I've said publicly, the the budget process is now, but there's lots of important things in the budget that don't get decided at this time of year. So for example, a big driver of the Board of Education increase is the teacher's contract that was signed. And it's also driven by personnel decisions that have already been made. So for example, hiring new teachers in support of the schools during the pandemic. A lot of that has already been baked into the process. So one of the things we need to focus on is to understand not just the various components, but at what point they're decided. That's why it's particularly important, for example, to make sure that there's lots of competent and focused voices at the table for a union contract negotiation, because that's a big part of the budget that has nothing to do with the budget process that we're in right now. So we'll take a look at that, review the stuff that is discretionary in the scheme of the current budget process, and highlight those things that are not.
Thanks, John. Yeah, a big part set, as you know, is 62% of it is personnel, 15% of it is benefits on top of that. So, and then you tie it into the contractual obligations. So that puts it over 3% right away. And then we have to continue to invest in the education of our children. And I think Dr. Adley has done a good job of looking to how we continue to move the district forward in a prudent manner, and of course always looking at efficiencies. But I look forward to the ongoing conversations.
There is no question that government service, including education, is a people business. So it's our most important asset to invest in, for sure. Okay, any other questions for John? Then why don't I give a brief report, and then we'll move on to Seth and Terry. So as always, there's lots to report. Hopefully everyone received my Thursday code red, letting you know that we still continue to do pretty well in terms of COVID cases here in Darien. I think people are very diligent in large part and taking the virus very seriously. So virus cases are trending down, which is great. The statewide caseload is also trending down. I think the positivity rate yesterday was just over 2% statewide, which is great. I know there's some concerns about school vacations next week, so hopefully everybody can just continue to be diligent. I know that, Duke will back this up, that especially for the elementary schools, if a positive case is identified in a school classroom, I think the entire class needs to quarantine in that case. So that creates a real hardship. So I really encourage people to be mindful of that, and certainly feel free to add in any comments you might have about diligence over vacation.
Yes, thank you, Jamie. You're spot on, especially in the elementary school level. And I think Alicia and Dr. Adley, bring this up as we go into the break. Please, everyone just needs to be careful of the travel, adhere to the guidelines and the testing. There's an incredible push to get kids in school. We want kids in school, but we've got to do it the right way. It's important that everyone follows the guidelines. It does, it can take out a whole class. It can take out a whole group of teachers, depending on how teachers and other professionals interact with kids. So it does have this ripple effect. One case this week equaled 17 quarantines, almost from an administrative standpoint. So, as we go into the break, I just continue to urge everyone to be cautious and follow the guidelines. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. So, things are starting to feel better because we have our vaccine clinics that are happening, not only locally, but across the state. Here in the town hall clinics, we vaccinated over 850 people who either fell into phase 1A or now in the 65 and over category in the first tier, phase 1B. We will continue to hold town hall clinics as long as we continue to receive supply. Next week, the town hall clinics will begin distributing the second dose for many who received their first dose a month ago. So you might imagine that as the group of eligible vaccine recipients grows, it will become a little bit more difficult for us here in Darien to manage the clinics in the way that we are right now. Right now, the Darien clinics are considered a closed clinic. So if you are an eligible Darien resident, you call the Darien Health and Human Service Department to schedule an appointment in the coming weeks. We may have to transition to joining the vaccine management system form of signing up for vaccines, which then would open up the Darien clinics to anyone who signs in to VAMS and selects this location as the numbers of people increase. So we will keep you updated on that as any changes are made to, yes, Terry, I see your note, thank you. Any changes are made to that process. But so far so good, and thanks to everybody who's volunteering, the great nurses that come and volunteer, post 53 folks that come and volunteer, folks from the community that have volunteered, nothing but excellent feedback on our local vaccine clinics. Reeves and Walgreens are also offering vaccines. It's best to contact them directly on how exactly to sign up in their locations. I think that Walgreens, you can sign up directly, but Reeves, you have to go through the VAMS system. But we will sort out exactly how you can access those locations and post that on the town website. So as you know, we too have, the Board of Selectmen has concluded our budget process for this year. The process, I have to say, was great using the OpenGov software. We were all very reluctant to give up our paper budget books, but with the help of Kate and Jen walking us through how to use OpenGov, we actually had access to more detailed information in our deliberations this year than we have in the past, right at our fingertips. So it was terrific. As you know, we worked very hard last year to get to a 0 increase, given what we knew the burdens were going to be in 2020 from the COVID pandemic. We were not so fortunate this year. We deferred a lot of things that now are necessary to address. So the Board of Selectmen's operating budget recommended to the Board of Finance will be $35.9 million, or a 3.76% increase. A large part of that increase in our operating this year is the Board of Selectmen's desire to complete the civilian dispatch model, to hire the 3 overnight dispatchers to finish the 9-person civilian dispatch model. We've discussed this for 10 years, and we think that it's worthwhile to finally bring the project to its fruition and to see the benefits that we can reap from having fully civilian dispatch. We also have a little bit of money in the operating budget for a part-time public information officer. It's become very apparent during the pandemic that you can't communicate enough and in all different forums. So we're looking for an individual who can help us with webmastering and public communications and sort of bringing together information from all of the town departments and putting it out in the public in a very consistent way. As far as capital budgets go, we are recommending to the Board of Finance a pretty significant capital budget of $4.1 million. Some of the items included in that capital budget are our standard maintenance items. You know, $1.2 million for paving, $750,000 for sidewalks. Some new things that we want the Board of Finance to consider supporting this year are redoing the tennis courts at Cherry Lawn Park for $250,000. They have long outlived their useful life, and given the glide path of the Parks and Rec capital budgets going forward, this seemed to be the right year to move that project forward. Parks and Rec would like to dredge the small pond at Tilly Pond Park and widen the pathway through that beautiful little park. So that sounds like a very worthwhile endeavor as well. And then we put a little bit of money in the budget, $75,000, to remove some trees and grade and plant some grass at the property where the former senior center was located off of Edgerton. It's this beautiful parcel of land, a little over 7 acres, right in the heart of a pretty densely populated neighborhood. With the Norotan Heights projects coming online, this would offer another open space opportunity for the residents living in that area. And at the very least, we should create a more usable open space. So it's really, the beginning of our thought process on how to utilize that town-owned parcel. So we look forward to our dialogue with the Board of Finance on the budget. Budgets are never easy, and I would like to encourage the Board of Finance to consider presenting to the taxpayers reports on historic budget increases and then projecting those out into the future so that people can see really the compounding effect of budget increases. Much of it is necessary in order to keep Darien a preeminent community the way we are and keep an excellent school system. But I do think that taxpayers certainly have a right to see where we've come from and where we might be heading in regard to property tax. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about state budget or legislature issues. I know Terry will, but the governor introduced, I think it's a $46 billion biennium budget. It's largely, from an expense perspective, a status quo budget, leveraging heavily on federal funding to help alleviate the deficits that are occurring in the state budget. So we're all going to hope that federal funding comes through. The good news is that all of the statutory and formula grants so far have been flat funded over last year, so no negative impacts to ECS that we know of, and lot SIP and pilot funding. There is a proposal in Hartford that in principle I support, to make pilot a 3-tiered system based on the needs of communities. I think we all recognize that cities that are overburdened with hospital property, nonprofits, have restrictions on the amount of property tax they can collect by virtue of that. So in theory, I agree with that proposal, but certainly the devil's in the details on how a tiered pilot system would be funded. New initiatives in the budget, which I'm sure Terry will talk about, is expected revenues from the legalization of recreational marijuana, online sports betting, and online lottery. So I know that the governor's considering that in his budget proposals as well. And then to circle back to the issues with housing and zoning, there are a number of legislators in Hartford that are aggressively pushing the ability for the state to make statewide housing and zoning regulations rather than leave it to local municipalities. Some of the ideas are worth pursuing, but on a town by town basis, I think it would be great for zoning commissions to look at the agenda and see what can work here and what might be unworkable. And I'll just give you a high level summary of some of the things that I think could work and some that are very problematic. Accessory dwelling units, that is to allow homes to have an accessory dwelling unit on their property as of right. That certainly could work in Darien in zones where there's enough property to do so, and where cars wouldn't be forced to park on the street, and where they have access to municipal services like sewer and water. But it certainly wouldn't work in some of our more densely developed zones in town. So that's a maybe in my book. They want to eliminate minimum parking requirements. For us, for me personally, I can only speak for me personally, and I will look to the zoning commission to weigh in on this stuff. That's a non-starter for me. If you don't have minimum parking requirements of some kind, that means people park on the streets. And that negatively impacts the pedestrian experience, bicyclists, and quite frankly, roadway maintenance and snow clearing. So I hope that that can be moderated a bit. And then this idea of within a quarter mile of commercial centers and a half mile of transit hubs like our train stations to have multifamily housing development as of right. And that means without a public hearing. So, you know, somebody who, just for example, who bought a house around the Norotan Heights train station, maybe on Edgerton, who thought they were buying into, a single family neighborhood, could find themselves where their neighbor sells to a developer who develops a 4-family home next door. I'm certainly not opposed to more houses and more people. We welcome people here in Darien, but with that comes traffic, with that comes cars, and all sorts of other challenges that when you buy your house, you're not expecting. So I will personally be pushing back on those as of right concepts. Everything should be left to local control. Darien is doing a great job through the Planning and Zoning Commission of supporting the development of new and diverse housing choice. I've gone on too long. Terry and I will be holding a Bring It Home event on the 24th of February at 7:30 to talk on that very issue and a couple other issues that are timely and important for Darien and the state of Connecticut. So with that, I think, Terry, did you need to go next? Do you have a time limit?
I do.
Okay.
I've got a 10 o'clock meeting I'm leading, so I'm going to be very brief.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for your patience, Seth.
Yeah. You're welcome. And I figured out doing a different device. Thank God for all the different devices and technology. And I also want to say a big shout out to Allie Ramsteck for all she's done to make sure all the seniors have been contacted about the vaccine. She and her team have done a really magnificent job. So the budget, I will just touch on briefly on the budget that Governor Lamont came out with on Wednesday. One of the themes is growing the economy, or how he's going to balance the budget is 3 ways: growing the economy using federal dollars that are probably going to be coming, I think the budget is based on this, sometime this spring. And the number that I've heard is between 1.5 and $3 billion. And then the other one is to utilize the rainy day fund, which is $3.5 billion. So there are good things in the budget. There are things that I want to learn more about. And I think Jamie described my sentiment on the housing issues. Some of them have merit. We need to learn more, but local control certainly is, well, it's the power of the people. And the closer government stays to the people, the more effective and efficient it is. And certainly it's so ironic to me that so many of the urban districts are pushing these zoning changes, particularly people who live in the urban districts, yet their urban districts are not thriving. So it's just problematic on a number of levels, but certainly creating affordable housing and more diverse housing is something many of us support. So although that's not part of the budget, I want to be clear on that. That's a legislative effort. So it's 2 things coming together. The governor came out with his budget speech on Wednesday, and it's available online, both the numbers and the budget itself, and also his speech. And now it goes to the legislature, and by middle of April, so it's another 2-month process, middle of April, a budget will be presented, and we end June 9th. So it's a real romp to get everything done. A lot of public hearings on issues, as Jamie mentioned, medical marijuana. I think they're now calling it cannabis for whatever reason. I don't know. We're going to see a number of controversial issues. Most of them are either in the planning and development committee, finance committee, or the public health committee. Public health will see aid in dying again this year. They will see, I think they're seeing the cannabis bill. There also will be removing the religious exemption on vaccines. We'll have a public hearing again. I believe that's next week. Open choice schools is going to come through education, and I think that's something we're all definitely interested in learning more about. And Duke, you and I can stay in touch on that.
Great.
Yep, because it's, again, I think that's something all of us, or many of us, supporting concept, just need to learn more about the details and how it would work. But I think it makes sense on a number of levels. I do want to encourage people to check the General Assembly website. Certainly touch base with me with any questions. I had an op-ed in yesterday's Darien Times. It outlines some of the proposals that are deeply controversial, including a $20 fine if you don't vote in every election. I mean, some of them are just, it's big government. It's big government on steroids. And it's nonsensical in a year where we're imperiled by COVID. We're not able to be in the Capitol. Public hearing process has become, while more accessible, it's a bit more cumbersome. So I think the goal for many of us was to not introduce huge number of bills unless they're deeply important to this year. But that wasn't the case with some of my colleagues. So please stay in touch. I have information on how to give public testimony virtually. I sent it out as an email. It's on my state rep webpage, which is repterrywood.com. And I'm always available via phone call or email. So I think that was it for me. Oh, it's flat, back to the budget. He does flat fund state union workers. So that should be done, and that will be highly controversial for the governor because the union members are heavily aligned with the legislative Democrats, or vice versa, both. I think that's it for me. Any questions before I jump off?
No, but Terry, we also posted instructions on how to provide virtual testimony
Okay.
on the town's website under the How Do I tab, so folks can stay engaged. And Seth, I strongly recommend that the PZNH committee of the RTM, engages and begins to understand some of the proposals that are coming through for the housing and zoning issues.
Right. It's critical.
Yeah.
And voices, many voices. It's important to hear as many voices as possible.
We'll talk to make sure we get the right stuff on the agenda. Okay.
Yep. Great. Thank you all. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Terry. Okay, Seth.
Yes, well, we have coming up a meeting on the 22nd. We got Tom Madden to come from Stanford and talk about economic development there, what's going on. And David Knopf called me after the last meeting and said, hey, things are changing so fast. We ought to do these briefings to the RTM at each meeting. And I said, fine, I'll put you back on and we'll get the latest update. And I couldn't agree with you more. Having been through the vaccination process, that's just one element that's going on these days. And VAMS assigned me to a Yale New Haven vaccination place in West Haven. And when I politely declined to have my second shot in West Haven, they said, no, you don't understand. You go back to the same place that you got the first shot. So tomorrow I drive back up to West Haven and get my second vaccination. Fascinating, but it's working. The RTM will also has on its agenda approval of the newly negotiated contract with the Darien Administrators Association, between the Board of Ed and the Darien Administrators Association. We also have the $1,788,130 special appropriation for the reopening expenses for the Board of Education to be approved, and then a couple of what I would call administrative matters. A change regarding the membership on the Monuments and Ceremonies Commission to reduce the size of it so they can fill the slots and have a fully operating commission. And also there is an item on there concerning the duration of the term for an employee member of the town pension fund. The Board of Selectmen has voted in favor of that. It turns out that the pension board, though, may not have acted on it. So if they don't act before the RTM meeting, we'll postpone this one to the next meeting. And that's pretty much what's going on. The RTM would certainly contribute as we might to the technology review that's being done by the Board of Selectmen. And, Jamie, just, let me know what you'd like to do there. We could have the technology committee be part of it, or somebody from the RTM who's got special, we're in it up to our neck. We've got 100 members on this machine, on this software, which, with all due respect to the people who wrote the program, I'm not sure it was just envisioned that we would be doing what we're doing on it, but we're getting it to work, and we think each meeting we get a little better at it.
So Seth,
Yes.
if it makes you feel any better, I have weekly calls with my colleagues, and the topic of how to handle online meetings or in-person meetings always comes up. And I have to say that we stand out as a shining example of a town that's figured out how to meet virtually in almost exactly the same manner that we would if we were meeting in person. So nothing's perfect, but we have done a great job compared to most other municipalities.
Well, I don't want to get too excited here, but the RTM attendance is way up. We're getting 99, 98 people because they can just go to their computer. So that's a plus. What we do miss is a lot of the dialogue that takes place in the meeting that's not in the meeting itself. It's just a chance for the members to get together and talk about things, which we miss. But I must say that it does, given the opportunities to not have it work well, it is working very well. Any other
questions for Seth? Steve, yes.
Yeah, Steve.
It's not really a question, it's a comment relative to what Terry asked with regards to PZNH being up on the housing committee. I talked to Amy Barsanti about it, once every 2 weeks. So I know I've already met with their committee and gone over some of those issues. I was invited to their last committee meeting, so that's the person. They're in the loop as it is at this point. Okay.
Good. Question for you, Steve. Will the Planning and Zoning Commission schedule a time? Your meetings are so busy, but will you schedule a time during a future meeting to discuss these issues publicly?
That's the goal of the subcommittee, and from the very beginning, dating back to November, we want to have a public meeting on this.
Yeah.
To go over it for the town. But I want to make sure that the subcommittee's ducks in a row, the Planning and Zoning Commission is on the same page, and then I have a quick meeting with you, and then go to a public meeting with the entire town.
I think that's a really great idea, and I've been closely involved on this issue through CCM, the CCM housing group. I'm a part of that and have worked on modifications to the desegregate proposals. So CCM will be sending me all of the bills that are related to these housing and zoning issues, because they're very hard to find at this moment in Hartford. So when I get that, I'll make sure that you get that to distribute to the commission.
That'd be great, because I know you're working on it. You're working hand in hand with Jeremy relative to it. So I don't want to replicate same work. If you've already done it and you and I have a briefing and Jeremy's done it, then it saves a lot of people a lot of bit of time. I mean, everyone does their own due diligence, but I don't think we'd have to step over our own, ourselves on this.
And we'll make sure that PZNH gets it as well.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I make one advertisement? I think.
Sure.
You asked about the support of the Parks and Rec to do the cherry lawn tennis courts.
Yeah.
Just for people's edification, one of those tennis courts is supposed to be converted to a pickleball court, which I think is the new latest and greatest that everyone likes in town. So if you support the tennis courts, you support pickleball.
Well, those are different courts, though. It's the front court that's planned to be transitioned into, I want to say, 4 pickleball courts. It's the other set of courts near the playground that we're hoping to redevelop.
Yeah, the P&Z had to approve the pickleball court transition, I guess. So we did.
Great. Okay.
And then, can I ask one last question, Jamie, with regard
Sure.
to the half mile, quarter mile? I understand the half mile from the train station. I've heard that. Today, when you said a quarter mile from a central business district,
Yep.
that's the first I heard of that. Is that just stuff in Darien that's zone CBD, or
Nope.
is it a quarter mile? It's like, for argument's sake, is Patton Drive, can that whole, and that's a quarter mile from a central business district? Can that whole street where, like, you know, friends of ours live on, can be converted?
Depending on how the language ends up, correct. There's some discussion that it would be limited to one commercial center per municipality, or one train station or bus terminal per municipality. As you know, the town of Darien is impacted by 6 train stations. So depending on how the language ends up, our residents will be more or less impacted, but it doesn't correlate in any way, Steve, to the zones that you have currently identified. The way I think about it is it's essentially creating a new overlay zone.
Because, like, even if you go on our Darien Post Road, the Darien Post Road is effectively the commercial district. If you say that Shake Shack is in a commercial district, that means everything on the backside of Old Kings Highway, was that Old Kings Highway South, is a commercial district. That's within a quarter mile of Shake Shack. If you go to the other end of town, where Academy Street is and where the new Royal Old Town Hall Homes is, you know, Highland Avenue, Academy Street, all those things within a quarter mile of the Post Road. That's pretty wide. It's a pretty wide area.
Legislative language matters. So we'll be watching that closely.
Thanks, Jamie.
You bet. Any other questions for this morning's OPC meeting? Okay, hearing none, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will
Motion to
second.
adjourn.
Okay, so
Second.
moved by Steve, seconded by Duke. All those in favor say aye.
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 Have a good weekend. Thank
Have a
you.
great weekend and a nice vacation week, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
See you later.
Leave.